Check, cheese.
Sound check.
Would you welcome, please, the five-time Entertainer of the Year, Alabama's own, Hank Williams Jr. A lot of us today that call ourselves stars, and all these new boys that think they're superstars, that includes me. Let's wait until 40 years after our death, and let's see how many records we sell and how popular we are, like this truly legendary superstar, Hank Williams.
Hank lacked a great deal of self-discipline. He never had much self-discipline, and he let alcohol control his life, and I think that was the reason that he was fired at WSM. That was what we heard. It was not unexpected. Hank sort of marched to his own drummer, and he missed programs, missed personal appearances, and I'm sure that alcohol was at the bottom of a lot of his trouble.
That was a very sad point, you know, for Hank in his life, because I think every country music artist, his dream is always, you know, to be on the Grand Ole Opry. And when that happened to Hank, why, I think that took a lot, you know, out of Hank, you know. He was quite disappointed.
Divorced from Audrey, separated from his son, Hank Jr., and fired from the Opry, Hank Williams tried to ease his pain the two ways he knew how, by writing songs
We
and
went
drinking.
up to Bootlegger's house, about 20 miles from here, north of here, at just outside of Alexander City, Alabama. And Hank, all the way up there, he had been telling me, he said, Bob, said, I feel a song coming on. He said, I can just feel it. Said, here we are, got the atmosphere, the Indians, the cabins, the beautiful lake. And he said, I just can't get it together. I don't know why. So we drove all the way up to the bootlegger's house. We drove around back of his house, which is typical of all of them. And Hank loaded up his back end with refreshments. So I was driving, and we started back down the hill. And as we went down the hill in Hank's Cadillac there, I hit a bump. Oh man, it was a granddaddy of all bumps. I hit a bump, and Hank fell forward on the dashboard and started pounding out the rhythm. And he turned around to me and he said, Bob, I've got it. I said, let's get back to the cabin. He said, listen, Kalijah, Kalijah, and he started beating it out on the dashboard of the car.
Is any wonder that his face is red? Elijah, that poor old wooden head.
When he came to town, there lies the trouble. Somewhere along the line, the thing that always seemed to give Hank trouble and interfere with his career, his songwriting, he got the drinking, and therefore wound up here in jail. So the man who arrested him at that night is still around. He now is tax collector of this county.
That night we received a call on the radio that there was disturbance at the Russell Hotel. So Jake Young and I were partners and worked together, so we proceeded to there. And when we got there, this gentleman in cowboy pants, cowboy boots, and a white hat was on there, and they were having a disturbance from Mr. Schaffer, who was manager of the hotel. And so we picked him up and brought him on to the police department here and began to book him. At that time, we didn't even know who Hank Williams was. We knew who he was, but we didn't know who we had. So we brought him in and started booking him. Mr. Davis was there, and we started booking him. We got to his driving license and found that it was Hank Williams. So Mr. Young had walked on back up in front, and I called him back. I said, Hank, this is Jake Young. This is my partner here. And we introduced ourselves to him. We told him we were sorry that he was in this type of trouble here in our city, but we tried to make him stay comfortable. So we carried him on back and put him here in jail and called Bob at that time. This is a cell that we put Mr. Williams in once we booked him and brought him in and locked him up. And this is where he stayed here, the 4 hours that we kept him incarcerated to be in compliance with the law at that time. Really, he was just like a lamb with us. Maybe the fight had gone out of him. The man was sick the night we put him in jail. He wasn't only drunk, he was deathly sick.
But I will say this, now let me go on the record for saying this because I want to say this for him and his family. He did take prescription drugs now. He would get the doctor to give him some prescription drugs, and he'd take those before he'd go out and sing to calm him down, and after he would sing to put him to sleep. But as far as street drugs and as far as being a drug addict, no, sir. I'll go on record right now, Hank Williams never did that.
He was mighty sick.
He was sick. That was the beginning of the end. 4 months later, he was dead.
The drug problem that Hank Williams had, he was very aware of it. He thought it was funny.
His doctor would prescribe pills. He'd take 2 when he was supposed to take 1.
Very loaded with codeine and what today would be considered very serious drugs. And Hank would say, well, it says on the bottle to take 1 every 4 hours, so 4 every hour,
So that'd
be 4 times better, wouldn't it? So that's what he'd do. Here was maybe country music's first superstar trying to go out on the road and work with a fused vertebrae and serious back operation, so he just did it because Hank was a good old boy and he didn't want to see him hurt.
It was painful for
That's
him
right.
to travel.
And
sit
then
for long periods of time with his back in the shape it was, and his doctor gave him pills for the pain, and that's what that was.
And Hank abused that, and eventually, before he died, it's our understanding, he had 2 or 3 doctors doing the same thing.
Mrs. Stone said that Hank's manager had called her and said that he was drinking a 5th a day of whiskey, and we just can't get him to eat anything, and maybe a can of soup, you know, in a couple of days, and the rest is whiskey. So when I called him up, she wanted me to, you know, go over there and see if I could influence him in any way. So when I called him up, I told him I'd be over at like 11 o'clock the next day and meet me at the airport in Shreveport. So I landed, and Hank was there. And he hadn't shaved in, you know, looked like a week. And he had red lipstick, you know, all around here. And he was weaving a little bit. Nice to see you. And so we drove by his girlfriend's house, Billy. And did y'all hear about Billy?
3 months before his death, Hank secretly married a teenage girl, Billie Jean Jones, in New Orleans. The next day, they repeated the ceremony twice for fans who would pay to watch. The weddings grossed $30,000. Nashville's elite did not attend.
When it came time for Hank to do his number, he was led out there to the microphone in Shreveport. And he pushed his hat back and he said, folks, this is a number I like to do for you. It's made me a lot of biscuits. Y'all cold, cold heart. Hit it, boy. And then he went through those, you know, Kalijah and all those tunes. And it just broke my heart, really. To see that talent, you know, and all that booze just mess it up. And you know, the people listening, they could tell that, you know. They could tell that.
There were 2 other people in the car. There were 4 of us. And one lady was driving, and I was sitting on the back seat, and Hank was sitting on the front. And he was turned around looking at me, and he said, all right, let's sing. So he started singing a song that he wrote. It was a hymn called I Saw the Light. And I wish I had a recording of his voice then, because it was not the voice that was showing off before a bunch of people, but it was a lonely voice crying in the night. He started singing, I saw the light, I saw, and then he stopped. And he turned and he looked at me with those dark, brooding eyes that I remembered from Dothan, Alabama so many years before. And he said, Minnie, that's the trouble. There ain't no light. There ain't no light.
I was with Hank all during the Christmas holidays when he was there with Billie Jean, this little French girl was there. And he just married her. She was only 19 years old. And he wasn't so, well, he wasn't drunk, but I mean, he was, you know, drinking all the time. I believe he had the Asian flu, but he wouldn't go to the hospital because this is his first date back on the Opry, and, you know, they fired him on account of his drinking up there on the Opry. And he told me, he said, I'm booked up through every night through May, and I've got to be at this show. I got to open up New Year's night. And he went, and he wasn't able to go. I believe the Asian flu killed him. Exactly.
I think, now a lot of them talk about what killed him. I think what killed him, see, they tell me he'd taken a shot in Montgomery. And went up there, and another doctor gave him another shot. He was already drunk. They were trying to sober him up, he got too much of it mix. That's what killed him.
He was on pills?
Oh, he was that dope, you know, they gave him that dope, them shots, trying to sober him up for that to show. And he was already drunk, you see, and that dope and that drinking didn't go together. It killed him.
But Hank didn't die from an overdose of drugs. Hank didn't die from alcoholism. Hank had a heart attack, and his autopsy shows that he had a heart attack.
He asked me if I would drive him up to West Virginia, I believe. Had to do a show up there. I think New Year's Eve. And I told him that I had several businesses going, you know, and I was so busy. I'd love to, but I just can't. So the driver that drove him up there stopped somewhere en route and said, Hank, let's go in here and have a cup of coffee. And Hank was dead in the back seat. And that's one trip I'm glad I didn't make, is that one.
I would not call Hank's death tragic. Hank did that for which he came. Just as you and I, when we have done that for which we came, then we will leave.
On January 4th, 1953, Nashville's biggest stars, Hank's family, his 2 wives, and 25,000 fans, both inside and outside Montgomery's Municipal Auditorium, joined in mourning the death of Hank Williams.
But he was awful sensitive. But he never lost his cool at me that I know of. And the last word I heard him speak 2 weeks before he went into that hotel with Charles Carr, come on and play with me. His arm was in a sling. I said, who you got playing with you? I was getting coffee for the crew at the sign company. And he said, I ain't got a GD soul but me and my guitar. That's when he had done parted company with that one in Louisiana. And he said, I wish to hell I didn't have nothing but my guitar. But if you'll come on and go with me, I'm gonna make a movie in Hollywood. I said, man, I got to make a living for my family. He said, I can pay you more in a day and you'll make in 2 years on that job down there, which was just below the boarding house. But good Lord undoubtedly led me to go that way, didn't he, Mama?
He was Hank. And he was one of the finest, most unselfish, lovable persons I've ever met. Even though later on in years you see these films and everything where he got real bad drinking and all, but that didn't count with me. I could see him for what he was, the tender, human, loving person that he was.
Life sometimes can be so cruel that a heart will pray for death. God, why must these living dead know pain with every breath? So help your sister along the road, no matter where you start. For the God that made you, made them too, these girls with broken hearts, like mine.
My mother felt like she failed. She felt like that it was her fault that my father passed away so young. And I guess about a year or so, she began to drink a little socially. I married in 1960, And a year after I married, when she would call, I could tell that she was drinking more and more and more. And I sit and watched her drink herself to death. She took Equinil. It's a tranquilizer. She ended up killing herself the same way. She was only 52. She followed right in his footsteps. She did things after she began to drink a lot that she would have never have done if she had not been drinking.